Okay, so the Russian monk had a couple more questions. So he said, please tell me a little more about how to breathe when practicing taking and giving, or tonglen. When I inhale the suffering of living beings, is it necessary to hold my breath or leave it in its natural rhythm? How do you do such practices? So I think at the beginning, my idea is you practice it without using the breath, because our mouth is not, our mind, is, our mouth too probably, is not very used to uh, thinking in this way. So it's important we spend some time doing the meditation and then really have a feeling for it, and then imagine taking on other living beings suffering, and do that for a while without uh, thinking about the breath at all, okay? So that you can really feel like, you know, am I ready to take on others' suffering? How do I feel about taking it on? How do I use my mind when if I'm going to experience the suffering of others? Okay, so that you don't, you have time to actually meditate when you're doing the meditation. Okay, then when you get very good at it, yeah, very proficient, then the taking and giving can be done much more quickly, yeah, where you inhale and you imagine taking on their suffering and it's smashing the self-centeredness and self-grasping ignorance. And when you exhale, sending out body possessions and merit in the form of whatever others need. Okay, but I think you have to be pretty proficient to add it to the breath so that it really has an impact on your mind. Otherwise, if you haven't really meditated on compassion, if you haven't really, generated the strong wish to endure suffering for the benefit of others, then it just becomes, like, counting the breath or something like that. It doesn't have an impact of generating love and compassion in your own mind. Then some lamas also say that when you inhale, imagine inhaling black smoke, which is the suffering and dukkha of other living beings, and you imagine inhaling that through your left nostril. It strikes and shatters the self-centeredness at your heart, and then when you exhale through the right nostril, thinking of sending bright, beautiful light, the nature of your body, possessions, and merit to other sentient beings. So you can also do that, you know, instead of just in through both nostrils, out through both. Black light in the right, in the left, pure light coming out of the right. Okay, but I really encourage people to think deeply about doing this. Yeah, because some people don't do the meditations to generate bodhicitta, they just go directly to taking and giving. And if you do that, at least my experience is I don't feel very much. Yeah, which is maybe why some people like that practice. Because you can talk yourself into feeling good, but actually you haven't felt very much. Whereas if you really sit there and think, you know, do I want to be, you know, somebody on needing a vent for the coronavirus, and I'm in a hospital and I can't breathe and my lungs are filling with fluid and there's no vent? Do I want to take that person's suffering? Even if they have the virus and they're at home sick, am I really willing to take on somebody else's suffering? Hey, I don't even like my own suffering, and I think it's unfair, and I think other people should take my suffering because I don't want it. So what am I doing at taking others? Do I really want to do? And I think challenging ourselves in that way so that we can really work up to imagining having that level of courage whereby we can take others' suffering and give them our happiness. Yeah? And in that way, I think it really makes our love and compassion for others grow very much. Then, now this question is great. You'll love this one. I know some Russian practitioners who do the tonglen practice with marijuana. On the inhale, they are pushing the smoke. Suffering of all beings. And they hold the smoke suffering in the lungs. I'm taking all the suffering of sentient beings, a big long drag off of a joint and holding it. And then on the exhale, they give loving kindness to the living beings. The She said on the exhale, they forget. Yeah. Okay. At the same time, they experience very strong feelings of love and compassion. How do you feel about this approach? If it really helps people to change their minds? Well, I think that if this approach really were the way to do it, the Buddha would have taught it. And Nagarjuna is the source of taking and giving in Precious Garland. He would have said that you do it also with, inhaling the smoke from a joint. And all the lineage lamas would have taught to do that, because every society has access to intoxicants. So they all would have taught it, but it's very, very strange, isn't it? None of them taught doing meditation, getting high when you're high, let alone doing it, inhaling, the intoxicant when you're inhaling suffering. Yeah, none of them taught that. And what do you call it, ayahuasca? None of them, taught using that for getting a feeling for previous and future lives, So my feeling is, if the Buddha and the great sages of the past didn't teach that, it's probably not so wise to do that. Yeah, why not? Because it's very artificial, isn't it? Yeah. And especially, you're taking on suffering when you're inhaling from the marijuana. That's when you get the big hit. Yeah, that's really taking on suffering, isn't it? Yeah. So, I think it's better. We need to train the mind and make it so that the mind has a new way of training and of doing things. Okay, sorry to disappoint people. Yeah. That's the precept that people find the hardest. Of the 5 precepts, that one and the unwise and unkind sexual behavior. But even more than the sexual one, this one about intoxicants, people find so difficult. Yeah. And I know when I first took the 5 precepts, on those 2 precepts, actually on most of the precepts, I had a little, I'll keep it as long as da 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 da. I had my own little caveats that I made on each of the precepts. Yeah, until I really kind of started to get a little smarter and realize that the precepts were to help me control my negative behavior. Okay, so that's that. Okay, so we'll stop here today, and then I'll do this other one next week. Do people have comments or thoughts on?
I just want to emphasize, to train the mind from within and not with a stimulus from the outside. And then you are always dependent on something from the outside, like this kick, and also your lungs are affected at one point by all the smoke that you're inhaling. And just imagine exhaling out, and you want to exhale out this white light, but your lungs are actually totally sick due to the tobacco and tar, right? That's cluttering your lungs. So you don't have the power you could have without.
So for a person who's really convinced that, they don't have the capacity just through, their creative potential to change their thinking, and that, they're used to this kind of quick fix of changing a state of consciousness, a mental state with a substance, and that's what they've come to rely on. So then for that person, like, how would you convince them that they really do have the potential to do something with their own mind?
I mean, they just have to hear teachings and think about teachings. I'm not going to try and convince anybody of anything. That's not my role. My role is to present the teachings and let people think about them themselves. Yeah. So, you present the teachings and give people the space to think, and hopefully they'll come to see that they have some inner potential. And if they don't, then they may want to go to AA or NA or something else, to help them if they have a substance abuse problem,